It's been quite a busy month of reading for me. For the first time in a while, I've actually got through several books, most of them in the series of Unfortunate Events, but I've also come close to finishing one book, a classic that I think might be maybe a bit overrated, or at least not to my taste, and another book that I am finally coming to the end of finishing and that I've been really enjoying reading. But let's start with the series of Unfortunate Events, because these are the books that I've been reading pretty much constantly this month. I read all the way from the 4th book, I think, up to the 9th book, and I probably would have read more, but unfortunately I lost the 10th and 11th book, so I had to buy those again. As I said in last month's video, this is a reread for me. I used to really enjoy the series of Unfortunate Events when I was younger. It tells the story of the Baudelaire orphans, the very tragic and depressing story. They lose their parents in a fire, and they are, from that point on, constantly hounded and pursued by the evil Count Olaf, who is trying to steal their family fortune. I won't talk about every individual book, otherwise we would be here all day. I'll just sort of talk generally about how my experience of this reread is going. And I have to say, I've been really enjoying it. The books are just as enjoyable to me now as they were back then. I like the transition between the earlier books and the middle books, and then the later books as well. I noticed that when you get to, say, book 4, The Miserable Mill, Snicket starts to be a bit more experimental with the places where he sends the orphans to. They go to this mill and work for someone there and become part of this factory. They go to a boarding school for a while. And so there's lots of, and then they go to this village as well. So just lots of zany stuff going on in terms of where he sends them. And then when we get to book 7, 8, and especially 9, there's this change in which the Baudelaires have to go on the run, and they're now the ones who are disguising themselves, and they're the ones who are making questionable moral choices. And I like that. There's a real sense of growing maturity in the series where the children begin as innocent victims to the situation that they find themselves in, but then as they mature, they realize the ambiguities in morality. They have to make questionable decisions, and I'm really enjoying that transition. And also just how dark the series is for a children's series. It really isn't afraid to feed people to lions, quite literally, or have people get sawn in half by the lumber mill. So there's all kinds of stuff going on that you don't really think much of when you read it as a kid. But I like that Snicket is able to have these darker moments in the story without it being graphic and too disturbing. He manages to try to fine line, and I think that's really difficult to do with children's literature. But overall, yeah, I'm just really enjoying rereading this series. I'm hoping that I will continue to enjoy it. I'm looking forward especially to getting onto the 12th book, because as much as I loved the series as a kid, I think it came out around the time I was becoming a teenager, and I did not read the 12th book. I did read the 13th one, I just missed out on the 12th one. So I'm looking forward to finally reading that one and seeing how I view it. I do roughly know what happens because I watched the TV series, but I'm looking forward to seeing how it's done in the book. The next thing on this list is 100 Days of Solitude, and this is a book that I was wary of a little bit initially because it's magic realism and I have a love-hate relationship with that genre. But initially I really enjoyed this story. It's a family saga that follows this family. They found this town called Macondo, I want to say, and it follows them through, I think, 7 generations. And the issue that I have with the book is that the first generation, the second generation are really interesting characters. I really was drawn into their stories, the family dynamics between them. And unfortunately, as the book goes on and we transition to the later generations, I find myself to be less interested in those generations. And so now I'm basically stagnating with about 100 pages to go. And this is, I think, just a problem with family saga books in general. There is always that risk whenever you want to tell a story. I mean, Wuthering Heights is another good example. As much as I love that book, you set up all this stuff in the first half of the book, characters die or disappear, and then if the new characters aren't as engaging or interesting, or the story isn't as good, then it makes it worse because as a reader you're always harking back to the earlier part in the story. So I am struggling with my reading of this. I also think because a lot of it is going over my head as well, I'm not really sure what the book is supposed to be saying, if anything, which is a general critique I have of magical realism as a genre. I'm sure there is stuff there, so if you've read this and you're aware of the symbolic meaning of things, I'd be interested to get your thoughts down out in the comments, because although I'm not enjoying the book as much as I did at the beginning, I also don't think it's necessarily a bad book. I'm not one to sort of conflate my personal preferences with whether something is objectively a good or bad story. I can see that it's well written. It's very funny in places as well. The world is interesting, even if it's a little strange. It's just not grabbing me. The characters aren't grabbing me in the right way. And I think it's to do with the issue, I think, with magical realism, which is sometimes the absurdity makes it very hard to connect with the world and the story and the characters. And when the connection to the characters falls apart, at least for me, I find it very hard to be engaged in the story. For me, it needs to be more than just, well, this is symbolic of this political situation or this mythos or whatever it is. There needs to be something more, and I just don't feel like this book has that more, or at least I'm not picking up on it. I don't know if it's something I will try again. Maybe I will, but it certainly wouldn't be something I would try again immediately, because it's really slowing me down, and I'm glad that I've had the series of unfortunate events to tide me over, because otherwise I might have stagnated in my reading, and I really don't want to do that, because I've been getting back into reading again, and I want to sort of keep up the memento. So unfortunately, this isn't a book that I'm enjoying very much, but if you do enjoy it and you think that there's something that if I recognise that part of the story that I might then come to enjoy it, I definitely like to hear about that in the comments. And the third thing that I have been reading is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I finished The Two Towers this month, and I'm just about to finish the Return of the King as well. I'm just on the chapter about the Shire at the end, the Scouring of the Shire, and I am really enjoying this book, this series, I suppose, this trilogy, because it was something that I gave up on maybe 5 years ago. I read The Fellowship of the Ring. I enjoyed it. It wasn't changing my world necessarily, but I enjoyed it enough to pick up The Two Towers. And I started reading that, and I think I got to not far from the beginning, and I just gave up. I don't know why. I just didn't feel the need to pick it up again. So I just didn't. And then recently I decided to try it again, just because obviously this is a foundational text in fantasy. People rave about this text and everything else. So I thought, it's time to give it another go. I'm doing it with the audiobook this time, as I find that can be a good alternative if I struggle with reading something the first time. Audiobooks can sometimes bring it to life, and that has really worked in this case. I flew through The Fellowship of the Ring. I was a bit slow with The Two Towers, but not because I was not motivated. I just had lots of things going on, and I've sped up a bit more with The Return of the King. But yeah, I'm really impressed by the world building now. I can see that Tolkien is a great world builder. I can see that his characters are actually have more depth to them than I took the first time. I didn't really find his characters to be that interesting on that first read, but especially as the story develops, you really start to see the relationships. I think probably what it is that because in The Fellowship of the Ring, you have so many characters, and so it's hard to really give any one character or any particular relationship time to shine, because in the later books they split up. It means that Tolkien can spend a little bit more time focusing in on certain dynamics, especially Frodo and Sam, while they're traveling, of course, but also for other characters, even lesser characters like Legolas and Gimli. They have their little moments, and so that's something that I really appreciate. I'm also really enjoying The Scouring of the Shire, because it's something that was cut from the films. It's not something I had seen before. I knew it as a plot point. I just didn't know how it went. And I can see why the film chose to do that, because the story really does feel like it has ended for a while. You have all of the happy ending things, people coming together, people leaving, going home. But actually, I think it's more deep and more narratively satisfying in a way to have this ending, because the hobbits have gone on this journey. They've been taken out of their comfy little cozy box, and they have changed. They've become stronger people. They've become more adventurous, and throughout that they've been assisted by others. But having this ending point where they go back, they know that things aren't good, and Gandalf basically says to them, look, you don't need me anymore, you can deal with this yourself. There's something really nice about that. It shows how these characters have grown, and they're able to deal with these problems head on. And that's something that you see just immediately as they get back. They're not overly afraid to take on the people that are there. They want to take the Shire back. They want to motivate everyone else to get involved. And it's really nice to see that. It really shows you how they've grown as characters from their adventure. A lot of stories tend to end after the defeat of the major villain, and that makes sense in a lot of ways, because the major villain or obstacle is the thing that drives the narrative. But having this point afterwards where you are able to actually reflect upon how the story has changed them a little bit and show how they've developed is actually a really impressive thing that you don't see all that often. It also serves a good narrative point, which is to show that while things have ended in terms of Sauron's death, It doesn't mean that the world is now all roses and sweet and honey. There's still darkness in the world to be confronted, and not everyone who helped the first time, i.e. the elves, Gandalf, are going to be around to deal with this all the time. It's now the time of men, and I guess also the hobbits, and that they're not going anywhere either. So overall, I'm really glad I picked up this series again, and unlike 100 Days of Solitude, I will be reading the text itself, I think, afterwards. I think now that I've got my bearings in the world and I can appreciate all this stuff through the audiobook, it would be nice to actually read the text, because I think that will give me an even deeper insight into the story, and maybe then I'll feel comfortable enough to do some reviews and maybe analyses of the text as well. So that's everything for my reading this month. Been pretty productive, especially with the series of Unfortunate Events. Less so with 100 Years of Solitude. Hopefully I will finish that very soon so I can move on and read other things. But overall, it's been a pretty good month for reading. Let me know down in the comments what are your thoughts on any of these books if you've read them, and what have you been reading this month as well. Otherwise, take care everyone. Ta-ra.